Good day, collectors and viewers. Social Distance Warrior is back, and today we're going to look at our second most popular Astromech droid. This one is R5-D4 from Star Wars A New Hope. So R5-D4 made his debut back in 1977 in the first Star Wars movie, which was later titled Episode 4, A New Hope. We see him right in the beginning, parts of the movie when C-3PO and R2-D2 go on an adventure. But before we go on this adventure and talk, let's talk about R5. Let's talk about his backstory. So what's amazing about Star Wars is that many times, there'll be fan-made stuff, there'll be lore stuff, and then eventually someone will make it canon. And that's exactly what the case is with R5. So R5-D4 wasn't just any regular Astromech droid. He was a droid that had his memory wiped. And initially, for many years, there was this talk and story that R5-D4 was a Force-sensitive droid, and that he sensed when Luke Skywalker was going to fulfill his destiny and needed to leave Tatooine, that he had to play a role in it to make sure that he met C-3PO and R2-D2 and that he continued on his adventure with them and not get killed by the Empire. Now, it's kind of silly to have him as a Force-sensitive droid, so that was just kind of a lore backstory, and then years later they'd make it canon. So they'd take that story, and then we'd find out that he was indeed an Astromech droid that had his memory wiped, and he ran into R2-D2 on the Sandcrawler, and R2-D2 told him about this story, this mission that he had, that he's supposed to deliver the plans to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he was supposed to meet Luke Skywalker and continue on to that journey. And then when he was selected as the droid by Luke and Owen, he intentionally sabotaged it and blew his motivator so that they would pick R2-D2. So it's kind of neat. It's awesome, to have these stories, backstories on these characters. And you take a simple Astromech droid like R5-D4, and all of a sudden you legitimize them. And who knows, maybe we're going to see him in some previous Star Wars canon. Maybe he'll be in the Endor series. But it's just awesome to have that. So we get an action figure version of R5 in 1979 on the 20 back Star Wars figures, and that's this guy over here. So there he is, 40 plus years in the making, and he stands up really well today. And you can see he's got vac metallized a neck area there under his dome. Of course, just like the R2-D2, he has this part here, a sticker placed on the front of his on front of his body there that runs all the way around to the back. And of course, if you took these little characters and toys in the bathtub like I did, then you probably don't have him with the sticker on anymore. He became a regular droid. So of course I purchased this years later afterwards as well, because I needed to have R5 in the collection. You can see he's got a nice paint job. What was always fascinating to me as a kid is that he was completely different from R2-D2 in that he was red, number one, obviously, and then he had a different dome. So that was always fascinating to have, R5, R2, and then of course the Death Star droid as well as C-3PO having these different versions of droids. And I thought it was a great marketing ploy for these guys to have these different versions of the droids, and you can use your imagination and decide what you wanted to do with them, and if this droid was, part of some other rebel fighter pilots missions or whatnot and got lost. But that's R5. He does have some movement on his dome here, so he does click back and forth. Mine doesn't do that anymore, but nonetheless, the dome sits there nicely. If we look underneath, we'll notice that he has an area there for a foot peg, but he doesn't have it. He just has the nice two with the third leg. Foot pegs, he does have. The third leg he doesn't have in there. Okay, and he's got a screw that holds his dome on. It's not rusted, so this one didn't go into the bathtub, which was great. You can see his legs are articulated on the side as well, so you can move those up and down. Mine are nice and kind of stiff on this guy here. That's what he looks like from the side. So you can see he stands up really well even today. That's what he looks like from the front. Underneath from the other side. And then let's have a look at him from the back. And you can see that that sticker detail is nicely labeled there to show us that he is an Astromech droid with all these little different buttons on him as well. Now, there is a rarer version of this guy over here, R5-D4, for all you collectors out there. Let's bring him up close. If you see this little clear panel on the side over here, if you have one that's painted red or you see one that's painted red, that is a rarer version of R5-D4. It can command some pretty serious dough. So there was, of course, a different print on this guy here, and then some of them have that bar there colored in red as well. So that's R5-D4. That's what we got in 1979, and we got him, of course, repacked through the first 3 Star Wars movies. And then he disappeared. Star Wars would go dormant and come back in the 90s. And once it came back in the 90s, we were all clamoring for a new R5-D4, and we get our prayers answered in 1996. As part of the Power of the Force 2 collection, we get a brand new R5. He would come on the red card, but I'm up here in Canada, so I never saw him on the red card. He actually came out on the green card here with the holo for me, and that's this guy over here. And he's got this spattered paint job, so they're trying to give it a more realistic look on the R5s to make him look a little, weathered or dirty like he was on Tatooine. But a brand new sculpt, and not following what their R2-D2 looked like on the Power of the Force 2 collection, which was a nice figure. They gave us a brand new sculpt with action features. You're going to love the features that this guy has now. So remember the story we told you about him being initially Force sensitive, and then afterwards when they canonized it that he was just a droid with his memory wiped, and R2-D2 shared his story, and he was able to sacrifice himself to make sure that R2 got picked by Luke and Uncle Owen. So in this version, this droid has got some self-defense mechanisms here. So we can see on his dome here, he's got the antenna sticking up. That is a separate piece. That's not removable. It's fixed on there. No articulation on the head, and you'll find out why in a sec. We bring up close, you can see instead of having any sticker decals, they've detailed everything nicely and painted the front of his chest there. If we turn him to the side, we can see he does have his standard legs there with the blue, and then the silver wash coming across the front. Also, we're going to look at that in a second. There's a little yellow tab here on the side that we're going to look at in a second. There's his third leg. It's a little long. It's a little exaggerated, but we'll see why that was designed that way in a moment. And then underneath, we can see he does have his foot pegs there. On the sides, the legs are attached, so they're not separated here. And underneath there, we can see that it says 1996, Lucasfilm Limited, Kenner, China. Okay, so that's what he looks like from the front. Let's turn him around to the side here. That's what he looks like from the side. And then that's what he looks like from the back. Now, of course, this guy's got a little more bang for his buck. So if the Imperials decided to come and try to capture him, if he had the Death Star plans, he was in more position than R2-D2 to defend himself. So he's got cannons on the sides of his legs here that come up, and he can shoot any Imperials that try to stop him. Okay, or any Jawas that tried to get him, but in this rendition, of course, that wouldn't have happened. He never would have ended up on the Sandcrawler, but there he is. So, I mean, I used to pretend those were guns, also that they were rockets that would help him fly, but you could use your imagination there. And then his special hidden feature, you're going to have to sit down for this one. He has a firing mechanism inside his dome here. So his dome opens. There's a little slot here on the side. If you stick your hand there, you pull his dome down side to side, and all of a sudden R5-D4 turns into a very dangerous rocket or cannon. And he's got some details painted inside the dome there as well. So they went a little bit further, as well as the inside here painted, so they didn't skip out on the details there. And then let's see what it looks like from the front there as well. Painted, and he's got this little firing projectile here, and we're going to try it out to see whether it works all these years later. So if you press this little tab in here, the yellow one from the outside, then your rocket should fire. And you can take out any Imperial troops and maybe even get that rocket to shoot up and blow up the Death Star so that Luke doesn't have to. So let's push that button in there and see what happens. Bingo, up it goes. So firing mechanism still works. It's spring loaded. It's got a spring inside there. But as weird as that sounds, that was the R5-D4 that we got. And that's all we'd have for years and years and years as part of the Power of the Force 2 collection. So that's our R5-D4. Take a nice last look at him there, and we'll put him back down. So, of course, we'd all clamor for another better version of an R5-D4. We'd have to wait a number of years, but our prayers would get answered 10 years later in 2006. So we'd finish the prequel movies, and if you paid attention keenly when in Attack of the Clones, when Padme and Anakin went to visit or to look for Watto, to find out where his mom was, Anakin's mom was, they quickly on screen there, you can see R5-D4 pass by. So that's him well before A New Hope, when he was still an Astromech droid, probably on a mission. So there he was on Tatooine, and maybe he never left Tatooine for all we know. But that's R5 with a quick appearance in Attack of the Clones. And then, of course, we get a brand new version of him from A New Hope, and that's in the Saga Collection in 2006. Here he is carded. Now this is the Canadian version, or multilingual version of R5-D4 on the Saga Collection. He just has the stars in the back there, whereas the ones that came out in the States had a nice depiction of the screen, which was really nice actually as well. But this one stands out nicely because it's got the black background, of course, and he's pops out there in his white Astromech presence. And there's a nice picture of him on the front here. Saga Collection logo here on the bottom, and R5-D4, that's what he looks like on card. Let's turn around quickly to the back so you can see what that was like as well, and other characters that were in there. Of course, they merged the line together, so you have Grievous, you have Hammerhead, R5, and some more Cantina patrons there, as well as Han, Luke, Stormtrooper, and Darth Vader. And then these figures, where they would start experimenting with giving us gifts, and we have these holographic figures. There was a bunch of different ones, and this was Yoda that this one came with. Eventually, this would turn into Build-A-Droid parts, but that's what we got as the Saga Collection. So we have him loose as well. And let's bring him up over here. That's this guy here. So we can see we finally get the proper version of R5-D4. He's got a nice little weathered, textured look on here, paint job with some weathering on there. Everything's painted on there nicely. You know, the red labels, the front of it looks a lot like R2-D2, of course. His dome is definitely realistic now, matching what we saw in the movie, with the silver coming around there as well. Underneath here, we can see he does have wheels now instead of foot pegs, which is nice, so you can roll them along, and all three legs have the wheels on them. We turn him to the side, we'll notice that everything's painted nicely on the side there as well, and there is articulation, of course, on the bottom of his feet there. He does have these separate wiring parts here on the front, which gives it a nice, you know, three-dimensional look. It makes it for a much more realistic version of R5. Articulation on the head, of course, he turns side to side. It does click side to side, and you'll notice that there is a nice feature on the head here. In the movie, of course, to sacrifice himself, R5 popped his motivator so that Uncle Owen and Luke wouldn't purchase him, and they'd take R2-D2. And if you turn his head, up comes that motivator, so you get to see it. How neat is that? Let's bring that nice and close so you can see that as well. So this is the R5-D4 with the bad motivator. And you turn his head back, and then that motivator goes back down. So a nice little feature on there as well. Of course, the legs, articulation-wise, they do go up. Like we talked about, the feet are articulated there as well. And we look underneath here. That third leg does not go in and out. It's stuck there. It's stationary, but it does have a nice paint job along the sides of it as well. So they went all out on this R5 figure because we waited a long time to get him. We turn him to this side. That's what he looks like. And if we turn around to the back, there's R5 from the back as well. And you can see the dome is nicely painted all the way around. But that is the 2006 Saga version of R5-D4 that we get. And as we're going to notice, it's a pretty darn good version that would hold up really well even today as an Astromech droid. So let's put him back down there. So we fast forward a few more years now to 2011. Hasbro's started the Vintage Collection, and we get another version of R5-D4 on the Vintage Collection card because we're trying to complete that original Kenner collection. So much to collector surprise and dismay, we wouldn't get that ultimate version of R5-D4 that we wanted, but we would get another version of him here. So here he is on Vintage Collection card. You can see how nice he looks on the card back there. Definitely reminiscent of that original one that came out in the late 70s. And there's Luke looking at him there with the Jawas standing alert. And there he is nicely in the package, Kenner logo there. And he's got a really nice paint job, R5 does. And he fits in nicely on the card back there with a little red background there as well. He looks really, really good. Let's turn around to the back. We can see that he is VC number 40. And there's the original version of R5-D4 that came back out in the late 70s there, 1979. And he's got the free Boba Fett sticker. And there's some of the other figures that were available, of course, at the time as well. Luke, Clone Trooper, Commander Grease, Stormtrooper, and Han Solo, Yavin Ceremony. So, again, much to our, I won't say dismay, but to surprise, this R5-D4 is a little bit more of an inferior version of the one that we got from the Saga Collection, which they basically could have just took and put him in that card back and released him again. We would have been fine because it has the bad motivator. This one is the Build-A-Droid version figure that we got from the Legacy Collection in the late 2000s. So they took that Build-A-Droid figure and they repainted him, and he's R5-D4. And I mean, I don't have a loose version of him, but I do have another Astromech from that Build-A-Droid, just to show you what he looks like, taken apart and put together. So here's his body. That's what he looks like under the dome as well. He's got the computer there, and that's where the head attaches. And there's his dome. It's a hollow dome. It's exactly how that, R5 would look like. You take him out of the package, and that just slips on there. And of course, you had to buy a number of figures to get these droids built. And of course, these are the legs. The legs just snap on. Now, they gave these figures added play features. So there's a spot where you can plug the leg in here and a spot where you can plug it in here. But this definitely is an eyesore because you're not going to plug the leg in there if you're looking to have a movie accurate version of R5-D4, as we're going to look at in a second. I'll just slip his other leg on there as well. So the legs just pop on there nicely and they hold together really good. That antenna is not removable, just on top there, but R5 is supposed to have a bad motivator, not an antenna on his head. And of course on the bottom here, he does have a spot to plug in that third leg too. And then you just plug that one in there, and that's that Build-A-Droid version that you have in the package there of R5-D4. Now, if we just take him here and look at him on the package one more time, we'll notice that on the side here, he does have holes. It's kind of hard to see in the package. Let's see if I can catch it in that light there. So you can see behind the leg there, he does have that additional hole. It is the Build-A-Droid version. And again, that's a bit of an eyesore there. And I think Hasbro did listen. They didn't re-release him, of course, properly with the Saga one on this card, but they did take the Saga version, the one that's here, the better version, cleaned up the paint job, and then released him in a 3-pack on the Vintage Collection as well that came with the Power Droid and Death Star Droid as well. And that made a lot of collectors, of course, happy that didn't get the Saga Collection version of R5-D4. R5-D4, of course, does make an appearance in The Mandalorian in the opening episodes there of Season 2, where we get to see him, and we get, in case we were wondering, was that actually R5-D4? You can actually see the top of his head still burnt out where that motivator blew out. And he's now, of course, in good care. We get to see him continue his adventures. So we do have a Black Series version, of course, to talk about as well. This one came out in 2017. It was a GameStop exclusive. When Hasbro was pushing the Black Series 40th anniversary of the original Star Wars movie, we did get a GameStop version of R5, and that's this guy over here. I'll just bring him close. So there he is. He does come on that vintage card back as well, just like the Vintage Collection one does. He's a nice sculpt in there. He does have that antenna on the top of his dome, but it doesn't have the motivator that pops out, which is a bit of a shame considering how good the figure is. But that's what we got on the Vintage Collection card there as well. You can see he looks really nice in packaging there. He's painted really well. He does have the stickers that run around his neck here, not paint, which is interesting, but it gives it that nice reminiscent look, or accurate look, as he was in the movie there. You can see they look very similar on there, on the card back there. And then that's what he looks like from the back. There's some other figures that were available, of course, for the 40th anniversary. But that is our R5-D4 from the Black Series. I don't have a loose version of that particular R5 unit, but I do have another one that was from the 3-pack, and it's almost exactly the same figure. He just doesn't have the blue accents on here. He just has red. This one, of course, is the same sculpt. So it's the body of R2-D2, and then he just added a different dome on here to have him as R5. And he does have compartments here, of course, that open on the front with little gadgets that can come out. See if my little hands can take them out. So he has that on both sides, here and here. So nice little features added onto these Astromech droids. The head does turn side to side. There is a clicking motion there as well, and that's to bring the leg up and down on the bottom there. If we just bring that dome all the way around, we'll notice that we can then bring his leg forward as well, and he can be in position to roll away, escape the Imperials. Articulation, of course, on the legs too as well, up and down, and then of course on the feet. And now the one nice thing about these Black Series version of characters is that on the bottom you don't have just one rolling wheel, you have 2 of them on each side there, so that it can stand nicely in your display. So that's the R5 that we got with the Black Series as well, and that completes all of our R5 D4s that we've gotten in the vintage collection and in Black Series, and he's a great figure. Maybe we'll get lucky, they'll re-release him again with the proper better sculpt that we have of R5 there. If not, maybe we get him as a better sculpt on the Mandalorian card back because he appeared in that series as well. But nonetheless, we do have a definitive version of R5, and he's a great character and definitely reminiscent of that original Star Wars movie, and a different droid from R2 that had a distinct look as well. And it's great to see. So I enjoy doing this review. I hope you guys click and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and like the video, and I look forward to making more. Thanks so much.